Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you will completely change how you see relationships falling apart. A man in his 60s named David revealed something that stops most people in their tracks. His words were simple but devastating. I didn't walk away because I was miserable. I walked away because I stopped feeling safe. Notice he didn't say unhappy. He said unsafe. That difference changes everything. Most people believe relationships die because of dramatic moments. Infidelity. Screaming matches. Unforgivable words thrown across the kitchen. Plates smashed against walls. Doors slammed in the middle of the night. That final argument where someone says the thing you can never take back. But that's not what actually destroys them. What destroys them is something far more subtle. Something most people never see coming. Something that happens in the quiet moments, in the spaces between words, in the tone that shifts without explanation. It's the thing that makes a man's stomach tighten when he hears her footsteps. The thing that makes him rehearse simple sentences before speaking them out loud. The thing that turns his own home into a place where he has to perform just to keep the peace. And here's what makes this truly devastating. By the time most people recognize it, years have already passed. Years of small adjustments. Years of walking on eggshells that somehow became normal. Years of telling himself it's just a phase, she's just stressed, things will get better once this situation resolves. But the situations keep changing and the pattern stays the same. David didn't wake up one morning and decide to leave. He woke up one morning and realized he'd been gone for months already. Emotionally checked out. Running on autopilot. Going through the motions of a relationship while his actual self had retreated somewhere deep inside just to survive. He realized he couldn't remember the last time he felt relaxed in his own living room. The last time he spoke without calculating how his words might land. The last time he made a simple decision without bracing for a reaction he couldn't predict. And that's when it hit him. The problem wasn't that he was desperately unhappy. People can work through unhappiness. People can communicate about problems. People can fight and repair and grow. The problem was that he felt fundamentally uneasy. Like he was living with a stranger whose moods he'd spent years trying to decode. Like he was a guest in his own life, always aware he might overstep some invisible boundary he didn't know existed until he'd already crossed it. Unease isn't something you can fix with a conversation. It's not something you can resolve with flowers or apologies or promises to do better. Because unease lives in your nervous system. It's the feeling that keeps you alert when you should be resting. The tension that never fully releases even in moments of calm. And once a man recognizes he's been living that way, something breaks that can't be repaired. Not with effort. Not with time. Not with love. Here's what actually breaks relationships. Emotional inconsistency. When someone's warmth arrives without warning and disappears just as quickly. When closeness turns to coldness overnight. When availability becomes withdrawal, then back again, with no clear pattern. This creates something dangerous. A psychological loop. And here's what happens next. The man begins adjusting himself. Constantly recalibrating. Trying to bring stability to something that refuses to stabilize. Not because he's submissive. Not because he lacks strength. But because his nervous system is built to seek equilibrium. It's wired for predictability. When the environment keeps shifting, his entire operating system goes into overdrive. Desperately trying to create the steadiness that's missing. Think about how you feel when you can't find your phone. That low-level anxiety that spreads through your chest. Now imagine feeling that way in your own relationship. Every single day. Not knowing if today she'll be the woman who laughs at your jokes or the one who finds everything you do irritating. Not knowing if this morning's kiss means connection or if it's just routine before the mood shifts again. You start scanning for clues. Reading her face when she walks in the room. Listening to the tone behind her hello. Analyzing the speed of her text responses. Measuring the length of her silence. You become a detective in your own home. And the exhausting part is you're investigating a crime that hasn't happened yet. You're just trying to predict which version of her you're dealing with today. So you adjust. If she seems tense, you become lighter. If she seems distant, you move closer. If she seems irritated, you make yourself smaller. You're not even conscious of it anymore. It's become automatic. Your personality has become responsive instead of expressive. You're no longer asking what do I want to say. You're asking what's safe to say right now. You're no longer thinking about what would make me happy. You're thinking about what won't trigger a reaction I can't handle. And this is where it gets truly damaging. Because a man's sense of self starts eroding. He begins to forget who he is outside of this constant adaptation. His opinions become softer. His boundaries become negotiable. His needs become invisible. He stops making plans because plans might conflict with her mood. He stops investing in friendships because he needs his energy to manage the emotional climate at home. He stops pursuing interests because hobbies feel selfish when there's always this underlying tension to resolve. And the cruelest irony is this. The more he stabilizes himself to compensate for her instability, the less attractive he becomes. Because attraction isn't built on accommodation. It's built on presence. On groundedness. On a man who knows who he is and doesn't apologize for it. But he's lost that. He's become so focused on keeping the peace that he's forgotten how to simply exist without monitoring and adjusting and bracing for impact. His life has become one long reaction to her emotional weather patterns. And weather, by definition, is something you can't control. You can only prepare for it. So that's what he does. Every single day. He prepares. He braces. He adapts. Until one day he realizes he's not living anymore. He's just surviving. And survival is not the same as a relationship. A 58-year-old shared something that will make your skin crawl. Every single day, after work, he would pull into his driveway, turn off the engine, and just sit there. 12 minutes. Same routine. Same parking spot. People assumed he was exhausted from work. The truth was darker. He was preparing himself. Bracing himself. Because inside that house, the emotional atmosphere could change in an instant. Welcoming one moment, ice cold the next. Affectionate, then withdrawn. He never knew which version would greet him when he opened the door. So he sat in silence, in his car, gathering the energy to walk into his own home. Think about that. A man who needed to mentally armor himself just to enter the place he was supposed to feel most at peace. The place where he paid the mortgage. Where his clothes hung in the closet. Where his name was on the mailbox. And he couldn't walk in without a preparation ritual. He told me he'd sit there running through scenarios. Planning conversational routes like a chess player thinking 3 moves ahead. If she's in the kitchen, I'll ask about her day. If she's on the couch, I'll keep it brief. If she doesn't look up when I enter, I'll go straight upstairs. He had contingency plans for entering his own front door. Sometimes he'd check her car. See how it was parked. If it was crooked, rushed, that meant she'd had a hard day. He'd know to tread carefully. If it was neat, aligned, maybe things would be calm. He was reading tire marks like forensic evidence. Trying to predict the emotional crime scene waiting inside. Other times he'd look at the windows. Lights on in the bedroom meant she wanted space. Lights on downstairs meant she might want company. Or she might resent his presence. He wouldn't know until he tested the waters. And here's the part that haunts me most. He said some days he'd sit there hoping she'd already be asleep. Not because he didn't love her. Because sleeping meant safety. It meant he could move through the house without triggering anything. He could eat something. Shower. Exist without having to manage anyone's emotions but his own. He started working later just to increase the chances she'd be asleep when he got home. Volunteering for projects. Taking calls he didn't need to take. Anything to delay that walk through the front door. His colleagues thought he was ambitious. His boss thought he was dedicated. Nobody knew he was hiding. Using work as a shield against his own household. And the worst part is he felt guilty about it. He'd sit in that car feeling like a coward. Telling himself real men don't avoid their own homes. Real men face things head on. But his nervous system was telling him something different. It was telling him that what waited inside wasn't a partnership. It was a minefield. And every day he had to cross it without a map. Without knowing where the triggers were buried. Just hoping his next step wouldn't detonate something he couldn't contain. That's not a home. That's a war zone. And he'd been living in it so long he thought it was normal. Now here's where it gets complicated. The very instability exhausting him is also the thing keeping him attached. That's the twist. The chaos doesn't just drain him. It excites him. It sharpens everything. When affection comes back after distance, it feels amplified. When she reaches for him after pulling away, the contact feels electric. The reconciliation feels powerful because the disconnection was painful. His brain locks onto that relief. This is how the cycle tightens. Uncertainty creates tension. Tension builds craving. Craving makes the reward feel bigger than it actually is. So when warmth returns, even briefly, it feels like proof. Proof that the connection is real. Proof that the effort is working. Proof that he just needs to try a little harder. He confuses volatility with depth. He tells himself, we're passionate. He tells himself, we just feel things strongly. He tells himself, every strong relationship has ups and downs. But what he's really experiencing is intermittent reinforcement. And that pattern is powerful. Casinos use it. Social media uses it. You don't win every time. You win just enough to keep playing. Just enough to keep hoping the next pull will pay off. Some days she's attentive, engaged, affectionate. Those days reset his faith. They erase the memory of the colder ones. They make him believe stability is right around the corner. He just has to hold steady. Stay patient. Stay consistent. Then the distance returns. The tone shifts. The warmth fades. And he feels that drop in his chest again. That urgent need to fix something. To restore the high. He becomes addicted to repair. The make-up conversations feel intimate. The emotional talks feel deep. The apologies feel sincere. But they're happening because something keeps breaking. He's bonding over repair instead of building something that doesn't constantly fracture. The emotional roller coaster becomes the relationship. Calm starts to feel boring. Predictability starts to feel flat. When things are steady, he feels restless. Almost uneasy. Because his nervous system has been trained to equate love with intensity. With spikes. With drama followed by closeness. So he stays longer than he should. He invests more than he planned. He tolerates more than he ever thought he would. Not because he lacks intelligence. Not because he enjoys the pain. But because the cycle creates hope. And hope is powerful. Hope whispers, this time it will last. Hope convinces him that the next good phase will be permanent. But it never is. And the longer he stays in that loop, the more his baseline shifts. What once felt unacceptable starts to feel normal. What once felt chaotic starts to feel familiar. And familiar is hard to leave. If this resonates with you, take a second and subscribe. Not for drama. Not for blame. But for clarity. Because understanding the pattern is the first step to breaking it. Intensity is not the same as intimacy. And once you see the difference, you can't unsee it.